The Galactic War Council convened in silence, a silence not born of uncertainty, but of confidence so complete that discussion felt unnecessary. 12 species sat around the obsidian ring, their forms wildly different, yet unified by one belief. The outcome of this war was already decided. Holographic projections hovered above the table, displaying probabilities that shimmered with reassuring precision. Human resistance curves collapsed neatly under simulated pressure, their fleets dissolving into predictable chaos, their economies imploding under sustained blockade. The Council's chief strategist, a being whose species had never lost a recorded conflict, summarized the findings in a tone bordering on boredom. Humans lacked endurance, lacked unity, lacked the discipline required for prolonged war. They reacted emotionally. They escalated quickly. They exhausted themselves. Every model agreed. Victory was not a matter of if, only when. Orders were issued calmly. Supply routes were extended. Fleets were deployed not in overwhelming force, but in measured waves, calculated to provoke human retaliation at specific intervals. The War Council expected defiance, outrage, desperate counterattacks. They expected humanity to burn bright and fast, to spend its strength trying to prove it deserved a place among the stars. But as weeks passed, something unsettling began to emerge from the data streams. Human worlds did not panic. Their fleets did not surge forward. Their communications were not filled with threats or pleas. Instead, they did something no model had accounted for. They slowed down. Trade lanes quietly rerouted. Military movements became sparse, deliberate, almost reluctant. Entire task forces withdrew from contested systems without resistance, abandoning planets the Council assumed humans would die to protect. Alien observers initially interpreted this as collapse, as fear finally taking hold. The projections were updated, confidence increased. Yet beneath the surface metrics, small inconsistencies began to appear. Human logistics did not degrade as expected. Civilian unrest remained minimal. Even more troubling, the humans stopped responding to provocations entirely. No retaliatory strikes, no angry transmissions, no dramatic last stands, just silence. And silence, the Council would soon learn, was not weakness. It was time being weaponized. Months into the campaign, alien supply chains stretched thin, not because of human attacks, but because of their own certainty. The war had been planned as a swift dominance operation, not a prolonged occupation. Resources were allocated accordingly. When humans refused to engage, refused to escalate, the alien fleets found themselves idling at the edge of empty systems, burning fuel, consuming morale, questioning purpose. Commanders began requesting clarification. Why were humans not fighting? Why were they retreating only to fortify obscure systems of no apparent strategic value? The Council dismissed these concerns at first, attributing them to battlefield anxiety. But then internal reports surfaced, showing something far more alarming. Human manufacturing had increased, not decreased. Their research output had quietly doubled. Entire populations had shifted into long-term sustainability modes, reducing dependency on interstellar trade. Instead of scrambling to respond to alien pressure, humanity reorganized itself for endurance. They dismantled centralized command structures, replacing them with autonomous regional networks that could function independently if isolated. Alien intelligence units struggled to track these changes because there was no singular target anymore. No capital system whose fall would break morale. No decisive blow to strike. Humans had accepted the loss of territory as the cost of buying time. And with time they observed. They studied alien doctrines, noting patterns the aliens themselves did not realize they repeated. Every council species favored decisive engagements. Every fleet adhered to predictable reinforcement cycles. Even their political responses followed ritualized escalation paths. Humans did not counterattack these systems directly. They waited for them to strain under their own weight. When the first alien supply coalition fractured due to internal disputes over resource allocation, the Council dismissed it as coincidence. When a second coalition collapsed after months of inactivity drained morale and funding, unease spread through the chamber. Simulations were rerun, variables adjusted, yet the models still predicted victory, because the models did not understand patience. They treated time as a constant, not a force. The humans understood something the Council did not. Wars were not won by speed alone. They were won by whoever could afford to wait longer. The turning point did not arrive in the form of a great human offensive or a dramatic betrayal. It arrived quietly in the form of exhaustion. Alien worlds began questioning the necessity of the campaign. Citizens asked why fleets were stationed light years away, doing nothing while domestic infrastructure suffered. Trade guilds demanded the reopening of blocked lanes. Military commanders rotated out, replaced by less experienced officers, unfamiliar with a war that refused to behave like a war. The Council's unity fractured under the weight of a conflict that produced no victories to celebrate and no enemies to visibly defeat. And then, after nearly a year of silence, humanity acted, not with fleets, but with diplomacy, not with threats, but with offers. Human envoys appeared simultaneously across multiple neutral systems, proposing trade, cooperation, mutual defense against instability. They did not speak of the war directly. They spoke of shared futures, of rebuilding, of reducing dependence on centralized power. Several fringe species, exhausted by the stalemate and enticed by human adaptability, accepted. Supply routes shifted. Political alliances realigned. The War Council realized too late that while they had been waiting for humans to break, humans had been waiting for the galaxy to change. By the time alien fleets attempted to reassert control, they found themselves isolated, overextended, and diplomatically constrained. Fighting humans now meant fighting half the neutral systems that had quietly aligned with them. The Council called for an emergency session, but the tone was no longer confident. Projections flickered with uncertainty. The victory curves flattened, then reversed. And in the final assessment, the chief strategist delivered a conclusion no one had prepared for. Humans had not defeated the alien coalition through superior force. They had not outsmarted them in battle. They had simply refused to play the game on the Council's timeline. By choosing patience over pride, silence over spectacle, endurance over dominance, humanity had reshaped the war into something the galaxy was not prepared to fight. The Council withdrew its fleets soon after, not in defeat, but in recognition of a truth too uncomfortable to ignore. The most dangerous species in the galaxy was not the strongest, nor the fastest, nor the most advanced. It was the one willing to wait. The galaxy did not collapse all at once. It unraveled slowly, quietly, in places no war council had thought to monitor. Trade convoys arrived late, then stopped arriving altogether. Resource worlds that had once thrived under imperial protection began rationing fuel, then food. The alien empire still possessed the largest fleet ever assembled, but fleets humans understood did not fight wars alone. They needed supplies, morale, coordination, and belief. And belief was the first thing to fracture. Human ships never appeared in open space, never challenged patrols, never offered the decisive battle. The Empire's admirals had trained their entire lives to command. Instead, reports filtered in of systems choosing neutrality, of client species quietly withdrawing support, of entire sectors becoming administratively unreachable. The empire's response was to tighten control, to issue harsher directives, to demand faster results from commanders who could no longer explain what they were fighting. Every order sounded confident, but every transmission carried a trace of uncertainty. Humans were not winning engagements. They were winning time. As months passed, something more dangerous than defeat began to take hold inside the empire: doubt. The War Council convened again, this time without ceremony. Projections were still displayed, simulations still ran, but fewer eyes watched them. The numbers insisted the empire should be victorious. The reality outside the chamber no longer obeyed numbers. When a junior analyst quietly suggested that human strategy might not involve conquest at all, no one dismissed him. Silence filled the chamber instead. The idea was unsettling. Wars were supposed to end. Victories were supposed to be declared. But humans had created a conflict without a finish line. They attacked no capital, destroyed no symbol the empire could rally around. They simply waited while internal pressures grew unbearable. One by one, alien admirals requested reassignment. Governors demanded additional resources that no longer existed. Allies began asking questions the Council could not answer. For the first time in recorded galactic history, an empire realized it was not being defeated by an enemy, but by its own momentum. When the first imperial system formally seceded, the announcement was brief and polite. It cited logistical strain, economic necessity, and the desire for self-determination. Humans issued no statement in response. They did not celebrate. They did not intervene. That silence spoke louder than any fleet ever could. Within weeks, others followed. The empire's military remained intact, but it had no unified purpose left to serve. Soldiers trained for decisive battles found themselves guarding empty space, enforcing laws no one believed in. Some began standing down voluntarily. Others simply stopped responding to orders. The humans observed all of this from a distance, not with satisfaction, but with recognition. This was how systems failed. Not through explosions, but through exhaustion. Years later, after the last emergency session of the Alien War Council had adjourned for the final time, historians would struggle to define the conflict. There were no grand battles to commemorate, no iconic images of defeat or triumph. Human records described it simply as a period of restraint, a time when action would have been easy and patience was chosen instead. Alien archives, fragmented and incomplete, spoke of an enemy that never appeared where expected, never behaved according to precedent, and never rushed toward victory. In the end, the galaxy did not remember who fired the last shot, because no one ever did. What it remembered was the lesson that followed. Power can conquer space, intelligence can shape outcomes, but patience can dismantle entire civilizations without ever raising a weapon. And from that point forward, whenever a species began calculating its chances of victory, it added one final variable to every model, every projection, every war plan. Not human strength, not human technology, but human time.